Yes. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hi. It's really great to be here today. Hi to everybody. And thank you to all the speakers that we've had so far for such a great range of talks touching on so many different topics. I hope some of those I can sort of wrap them up in together with my area of specialty, which is patenting and intellectual property. So I'm going to speak to you today about getting value from your innovation with a focus on patenting in digital health. So we're going to touch today on how to look at IP as part of your business and how you can look to develop your IP strategy and why that's important. And looking at where IP can be in a digital health business. The answer is in hundreds of places, so we'll touch on that. But there are particular considerations with trying to attack patent protection in healthcare and also in digital health if we're looking at software-based and data-based innovation. So we'll look at what can you patent and what might be in the grey area of patenting. We'll touch on some case studies to look at success stories of what you can attract patent protection for and what hasn't worked quite so well and why that might be. And just finally, we'll mention one of the big topics for today is data and healthcare data and some considerations for managing and working with healthcare data. So, developing your IP strategy. IP is intellectual property, and it's an umbrella term for lots of different types of intellectual property that you might have in your business. Intellectual property is really an asset for your business. It's something that is worth money to your business in the same way that stock might be in a warehouse or your cash in the bank. And so it's really important for businesses, and particularly startups and small companies who are starting off on their business journey, to really consider at an early stage what IP they might have, what IP they already have, and to protect it early on to really build a good foundation for securing value into their business. So we can see here that some intellectual property rights exist automatically. If you create something artistic, if it's written down, or it's a piece of code even, that can be copyright protected, and that sort of automatically exists as a right. Similarly, some design rights arise automatically, and a design right is something that protects the look and the aesthetic of a product. Some intellectual property rights you need to apply for. So patents are something that you need to apply for, so that's my field. And a patent is intellectual property and it protects something that's functional, so it's something that does something clever. Trademarks are also another intellectual property right that you can apply for. I have one of my trademark colleagues in the audience who's an expert in protecting your brand name and your taglines and really the name for your business. So when people see that, they go, I know who that business is and what they do. And we touched on the design rights that exist automatically. There are other registered design rights that you can apply for as well. And there are other types of intellectual property. So we've got know-how and trade secrets, and they're also assets that can exist in the business, and they're a way of protecting what makes your business special and what gives it value. So why should you protect your IP? Surely IP is expensive, or I'm not interested in IP at this stage, I'm going to worry about that later on. But actually, it can be really important to consider it very early on in your business journey, because it can add value because of your commercial exclusivity. If your business, and all businesses I think want to do this, they set up thinking we're going to offer something that nobody else offers, we're going to do something different, something that's going to attract people to our business. Whatever it is that's attracting that exclusivity is probably something that you can try and protect through IP to really capture your commercial exclusivity and keep it as an asset in your business in a secure way and in a way that can be enforced. So early on in your journey, why would you want to protect your IP and why would you want to invest in your IP? Well, I went to a meeting last week, actually, on the other side of the Pennines in Sheffield, where there were a lot of investor pitches. And one thing that kept coming up again and again is that everyone had some IP. They wanted IP on their sheet. They wanted to show that they were serious about their business, that they thought early on that this is something worth protecting. There's something special about our business that no one else can offer. And if you have that, it's something that can attract attention from investors. It makes you look serious. It can also support grant applications because it's a sign there that you've got a credible business and you've got a well thought through strategy for protecting what's special about your business. And investors and grant providers can see that and say, well, I know that if I'm going to invest in you, that money is not just going to get wasted away by somebody else coming along and stopping you from doing something, for example, or it's going to be part of your business journey, and it's going to be something that's tangible and an asset there that I can invest in. Once you have your IP rights and your business is going along, we've spoken today and we've heard from lots of speakers today about how sort of collaborative a lot of healthcare innovation can be. And it's not really down to one business or one company to make these things happen. It can be a big collaborative exercise. You might have data experts, you could have healthcare experts, you can have legislation experts. And if you have technology where you can capture part of it, but you need to work with other experts, so a manufacturing team or a data handling team, you can license out your IP and attract license revenue that way as income for your business as well. And there's also tax incentives. So a patent box tax incentive is a tax relief or tax help that you can have from the government if you've got patent rights in the UK. So there are lots of reasons why you would want to protect your IP in your business. But if you just get a patent, that doesn't guarantee you an income. What actually makes your IP valuable and what makes it a strong IP to have as an asset in your business? The first point there is how well the technology and the product is actually protected. Is it enough to have a trademark for your brand if everyone can come along and copy your device? Or is it okay to have a patent for some of your functional technology if no one's heard about your business and there's no marketing behind it? So it's really one of a series of tools to help promote your business and to make sure that your business is doing as well as it can do. But having that IP there to protect your business, it has to be good quality IP. We've mentioned there the term of protection and market coverage. So different types of IP can have different terms. So a patent can be applied for 20 years. And a patent is a bargain with the government, with the state. So you say, this is how you would do my invention, but you're not allowed to do my invention while I've got these patent rights existing, which can be up to 20 years. And the market coverage, so you can apply to have patent protection in various jurisdictions. And with trademarks, you might say, I'm going to have trademark protection in various jurisdictions. And also there's whether the intellectual property can be challenged or circumvented. And that's something that you want to try and build into your IP strategy early on with your IP advisor, is that if I apply for a patent for this technology, how easy is it for a competitor to work around that? How easy is it for somebody else to sort of tweak my brand name and also use it and not fall foul of infringement that way? So it's important to make sure that the IP that you've got is good quality IP and that it's really going to do the job for your business. So that's about IP in general and how it's valuable for your business. Particularly looking at digital health, where can IP exist in the business? I think sometimes people think about patents and IP, they think it has to be a overall trade name like McDonald's that everybody across the world has heard of, or if it's a patent, it has to be for a new device, or it has to be for a new whole system. But actually, that's not always the case. IP can exist in lots of different forms, and in healthcare, because of the way that healthcare is developing, and that's why it's so exciting to be a part of the healthcare innovation at the minute, is because there are so many different ways in which technology is supporting improvements in healthcare. So here we can see there are a wealth of well-being and telemedicine apps, which might call mHealth. So you can have like the mindfulness apps, or you can have apps where you can log your eating habits or whatever it is. And there's lots of different ways in which your mobile phone is now part of your sort of healthcare. I've mentioned that in silico medicine, which is an area which is where basically you're using your computer to sort of simulate a biological system to virtually test out perhaps drugs or treatments. AI, we've heard a lot about today, is an emerging technology, and it's emerging as a technology which is now something which can be really used. It's not something that's sort of space age anymore and in the future. It's something that's being used here and now in so many different fields. So AI in medical applications can also be an area where you might be able to attract IP protection. We've talked there about software control for medical devices. So a lot of the talks today have been about data and about managing data, but there are still lots of innovations in healthcare and medtech relating to new medical devices and the control of medical devices. So if you control a device in a new or a particularly clever way, maybe that's IP for your business as well. We've heard a lot about this, patient data recordal and retrieval. So I work on some patent applications which are relating to managing data, storing data securely, encrypting data, making sure that data can be shared between various people in a secure and a trusted way. And if you're doing that in a particularly clever way, in a new way, that can also attract IP protection. And finally there, we've mentioned about digital therapeutics. So for example, that may be an obesity tracker on your phone to help monitor sort of and diarise your behaviour to try and treat obesity, for example. So lots of different ways in which IP can come about in healthcare and medtech. So we've mentioned some of these. What IP are there in patents? Well, you can have patent protection for algorithms or computer code, which does something technical. So code alone can struggle, but if it's doing something like modeling a biological system, if it's being used to provide healthcare, or if it's being used to control a medical device, that can be something that can attract patent protection. A GUI on a device, so if you've got a graphical user interface on your phone or on a device that does something particularly clever or in a clever way, that can attract patent protection. The use of AI, I see this every week in a different application on my desk. Someone's plugged AI into something. So the ways in which AI are being used to develop image processing, data analysis, matching data records is really something that's taking off at an astronomical rate. If you use sensor data in a new way, that might be related to IP as well. So it may be a known activity to collect sensor data, for example, to measure your heartbeat. But if you realize, actually, if I match this to something else, there's a correlation which also lets me look at lung function, for example, that could be using sensor data in a new way, and that could be something you could protect as part of your business in the patent. We've mentioned about telemedicine, data security and remote monitoring, and ways to keep data safe and ways to use data safely. And that's just patents, which is my specialty. But of course, as we mentioned before, you can have trademark protection, designs, copyrights, and trade secrets protection. There's really a plethora of the different ways in which you can protect these assets in your business. And the best thing to do is to really talk it through with an expert and see what's there, see what might be protected and what's actually going to add value to your business, rather than trying to protect something for the sake of it and it's not really adding value. Let's focus on patents. It's my specialty. Can you patent it? Not everything can be patented. A patent is something that protects something functional and often something that's considered to be technical. In the field of healthcare, there are certain exclusions, and they're there to prevent it being a problem for doctors and nurses to treat their patients, for example, because of a patent right that they're not allowed to infringe. So you can't get a patent for a method of treatment or the human or animal body by surgery or therapy. And you similarly can't get a patent for a diagnostic method which is practiced on the human or animal body. However, there are lots of patents protecting healthcare innovations in this area, because a device that's been developed or software that's controlling a device which provides an output can attract patent protection. So the exclusions are there to make sure that somebody is not excluded from receiving healthcare treatment because of a patent right, but that's not to say that the devices and the technology behind it can't attract patent protection. As well as certain considerations for healthcare, we've also got patent issues sometimes with software. So this is my area of expertise, where there's often a misconception that if you have software, you can't get a patent protection for software. That's not true, because I've been doing it for 10 years. What you can't get a patent protection for is software alone. So just the code on its own is excluded as from patentability, because it may be covered by copyright, for example. But if you can demonstrate that there's a technical effect behind your software, that it does something more than just being code, for example, it's controlling something or it's giving you a new output, then that can be patent protected. I've mentioned there that a method of administration might struggle. So when we're talking about patient records, actually collating and mapping those records together might not be enough. But if you can get something more out of that data, or if you can correlate it with something else to give an indication of a medical susceptibility, for example, then that may be technical. So here I've just listed some of the technical effects that you could have with software. Perhaps you're using sensor data in a new way. Perhaps you've got a new way of processing data which makes it faster, or it makes your computer run using less processing power. It might improve the use of a device, for example. It makes it have a longer life, or it's got lower wear and tear because it's more cleverly controlled by the software. Again, I say AI, it comes up everywhere. So using AI, if you just say I've got a known device, but it runs on AI, that's not going to get you over the line. But actually, if you delve into it, the way in which AI can drive a different way of operating of a device or of a system, or if it's linked to a medical or a healthcare interaction, that can be technical and get you over the line. And also, if you're using a data output to inform a medical decision or a technical decision, that can also be considered to be a technical effect. So we'll just briefly look at some case studies. These are from European cases, and there are some successes of what can be patent protected and some cases that haven't done so well. So the first one here is a device for performing virtual surgery. So it's a console which can help trainee surgeons, but it can also be used in real world surgery as well. So this device was protected with the patent, but the software that was running on the system was also patent protected because the computer program is considered to be technical. It's not software per se. Actually, it's technical because it's controlling this device and it's being used in a real world way. And it was considered to be inventive because it can be used to train surgeons as well as being used in real world surgery. So we've got a software controlled device. I'm sorry? I don't remember, but I can look it up for you. So if you find me after, I'll find out. The second case study is like a data-driven system where someone has developed a way of measuring sensor data from a patient and using it to estimate cardiac flow output. And this was considered to be patent protected because it wasn't an algorithm alone. What it actually did is it took the sensor data and it used the sensor data to provide a different output to what was expected. But it was also an improvement because the way that the cardiac flow output had been measured previously, I think it was very specific. The sensors had to be placed very precisely on the body. But the way that the patented system worked is because it had certain algorithms could account for variability in the placement of the sensors. It was an improved way of obtaining better quality cardiac flow output data. So this was also patent protectable. This study was called an index disorder is the name of the case. And the case relates to looking at patient records. And you have patients who present with multiple different health disorders. And it's a software system which takes all of the data relating to that patient and their healthcare issues and their treatments, and it matches it together to try and identify an index disorder, which might be the key disorder or the key issue with the patient, which is having a knock-on effect with their other health issues. This is considered to be technical rather than just a piece of code because it related to technical features of a computer system and retrieving data from databases and matching it up in a clever way. But it was also not considered to be a method of administration, which sometimes they fall down on, because it was saying it was causing a technical effect. It was a way of automating a method of diagnosis for a patient and providing a clinical indication for that patient. So it was considered to be technical enough to attract patent protection. And the final success story that I'm going to present today is really interesting because it seems so simple, but it hadn't been done before. And of course, you can see by the diagram that it was driven by the pandemic. And what the client, one of our clients, did was to repurpose the camera facility on a smartphone to be able to automatically read the assays. So when you do a home COVID test and you have the markers, you might think that that's sort of perhaps straightforward to be able to take a photo of it, but actually because it auto corrected for the alignment of the photograph and the contrast, it could be automatically sent through for analysis at a remote facility. And that idea of having the data, the software that processed the image and was able to be used for a clinical indication or recording clinical data from these tests was also considered to be patent protectable. Not everything gets through. This case is actually very interesting because it was filed by Google, who you would think knew what they were doing. But in this case, they are struggling with the European Patent Office. What they've come up with is another sort of data record matching system. And what it does is it looks at a certain patient's records, for example, their x-rays and the doctor's notes, and it will try to match up points from their data with a different patient set of data to be able to provide some information on that other patient. In theory, as a patent attorney, I would say that there seems to be something there. But what the problem is that it's not been drafted, the patent application has not been written in the best way to be able to convince the examiner that there's enough there to be granted a patent. So what the examiners have said here is that it doesn't plausibly provide a linked health interaction. You could equally say at the level that it's been described, it's just matching up data with the outcome is just that it's matched data up. It's not saying, and there's a 40% indication that patient Y will develop diabetes because you've looked at patient X's data. The way that it was written is also too high level and too abstract. So at points, well, through the description, they've written to say AI can be used to more easily match the records together. But what they've not done is drilled down into the details to say how it works and what pointers it uses and the particular algorithms that are used to beneficially give the effect that they're claiming they have. So a key point from here is really if you are looking to protect a system which is very sort of software driven and driven by AI, for example, it's really important to get it right at the start. When you file your patent application, what you've got to work with is what you file at the start. So it's really important to get it right at the start. And the final case study I like to show, because I feel so sorry for the guy who's being scanned. He's having an awful time. Not only is he having something quite unfortunate irradiated, but his patent didn't get granted either. And the problem is there are two ways in which the application was written in, so that there's two ways to look at it. The invention actually seems quite clever, and it relates to monitoring the position of a patient so that you can monitor in real time whether they are receiving radiation therapy in the most effective way. So if you shifted slightly to the left and you're irradiating slightly the wrong part, that's not ideal. So the invention relates to monitoring a patient's position and ensuring that the radiation treatment is applied to the right area of the body. But the examiners are struggling with this because they said, you are trying to claim something which is a method of treatment. It's not fair if you get a claim to this patent and then a radiographer can't perform their radiation therapy on a patient because they might infringe your patent. So you can't have it for a method of treatment. But similarly, if you try and claim it in a different way and you're looking at the software that's behind it, it's not actually doing anything technical. You just got a code which is reading in a position and saying the position is 5 centimeters to the left. And that's not a clinical diagnosis. It's not saying enough to be able to have a technical effect. So this poor guy's gone through all this radiation treatment for no patent at the end of it, sadly. So that's just some case studies of cases where the patent protection has been available and some which have fallen down. Just on my final slide, because it's so critical to everything everyone's trying to achieve, is to look at healthcare data. A lot of this, I think a lot of it will be familiar to people who work with patient records and healthcare data. But if you are working in health tech and you're managing personal data and healthcare data, it's so critical that it's handled right. Personal data is anything that can be used to identify the user. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone's name and address. It can be enough that someone can be identified. That has to be collected in the right way as it is, but there's obviously special protection for health data because it is so personal and so private. So you have to make sure that you're storing it, you're using it in the right way. Often huge quantities of data can be collected as well. So it's important that you have the systems in place and the oversight in place to make sure that that data is stored securely and it's handled correctly. So it must be kept as safe and secure as possible. Some of these devices that are coming through, which relate to Internet of Things devices, so interlinked devices in the home, don't necessarily have the levels of encryption and security that are required to ensure that that healthcare data is kept with the right level of safety and security. So that's an important consideration. And also where the data is stored. If you're handling vast quantities of healthcare data and some of it's stored offshore, actually what are the regulations that are covering data that's not necessarily held in this country? Not only is it the right thing to do, and it's important to meet the legislative requirements, but also we heard some of the speakers earlier today talking about trust between collaborative working between companies. And it's really vital that if you're a company and you're working with healthcare data and patient data, that you can demonstrate that it's stored safely and securely so that the trust is there for the NHS, for example, or for other bodies, for investors to look at what you're doing and saying, I can see that you're taking it seriously, that you know what you're doing with this data, and to build the trust there so that everyone can work forward, go together, and that everyone knows that the data is being held correctly. And also, if we're considering multi working, different companies working together, it's important to consider where the IP is, who owns it, where is the IP need to be stored. If you're looking at trying to attract patent protection for handling data, it's important to do it in the right jurisdiction, because if all your data is managed on servers in a different country, that's the location really where you want to be able to patent protect it. So just touch on healthcare data. So in conclusion, software in healthcare is everywhere, and digital health is accelerating in all these different directions. It's a really exciting field to be working in. There are lots of different ways in which IP can be used to protect that asset in your business and give value to your business, both at an early stage to attract investment funding and grant funding, but also later on to be able to enforce your rights and carve yourself a space in the market that's your field. We've looked at patents and software and healthcare, and that something has to have a technical effect, and different cases of what can be demonstrated to be patent protectable and what's sort of fallen down. And we've also looked at healthcare data about the importance of keeping it safe. And that's everything. Thank you very much for everyone's attention today.